Hello and welcome back to the LFCS Talks podcast. My name is Troy Beyer, and today we're going to talk about reading. We have some phenomenal people at this school that know how to teach kids how to read, and we want to share as much of that knowledge with you as possible. So today I have Sarah Burmeister and Caralyn Blaker with me, who are two of some of the best reading instructors that I've seen, and they have changed kids' lives for the last 10 or more years here at Literacy First. So Sarah, could you start and just give us a brief bio, who you are, how long you've been here, what are the 17 jobs you've done, because we've all done a million jobs around here.
Do all the things. I'm Sarah Burmeister. I think this is my 20th year of teaching. This is my 9th at LFCS.
Okay.
I am certified to teach K-12 exceptional needs.
Okay.
And so that looks like teaching kids with learning disabilities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes I've been teaching like the fundamentals of math and reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Caralyn.
My name's Caralyn Blaker. I've been with LFCS for about 10 years. My journey before that was I was a classroom teacher before I had kids, and then I had kids and stayed home with them. And then my son got into Literacy First Schools over at the Primary Academy and by lottery. And I got here and I was like, wow, this is a great school. I love this school. And Sarah Butler was his teacher, and she is amazing. And I was like, wow, this is a great place. And that started my journey of volunteering here first. Awesome. Before I worked here. And then I've worked here for about 10 years. I've done a variety of things. Right now I'm in charge of all the Ames web testing for all 5 schools. And I am the lead intervention teacher. Intervention is basically small groups. So we help kids with reading and math, basically. So we do small groups, and I lead that. And then I teach full-time small groups. I teach mostly reading and phonics, and I teach reading comprehension, and I teach math. So we have busy days, don't we?
Totally, right. Right. So just to so our listeners and viewers understand kind of the difference, right? So specialized services or special education, as many call it, that is a different tier of support versus our intervention program. And so what Caralyn's talking about with intervention are students that might be struggling a little bit with reading or math. They're identified through our Ames web testing and many other methods, and our teachers kind of manage what we call accommodation and intervention document, and they'll kind of write that up, and your team will take over and apply research-based, done by almost every single one of our intervention teachers are credentialed teachers. So they're done with efficacy. And I've been told by some teachers that have had their kids at our school instead of the school that they work at have said, like, oh my gosh, your intervention program is better than my school's like full on special ed program.
It is strong.
Yeah, we have a good program.
Right.
Thank you.
So intervention, it simply means students that struggle with reading a little bit or math a little bit or with behavior and things like that. And that's what you support. Yes. Sarah, you're supporting students across the spectrum of all kinds of different needs, whether students with autism or students with ADHD or a learning disability that affects their reading and math. But they're identified through typically an IEP or a Section 504 plan, correct?
Yep.
Got it. Perfect. Yep. Cool. So I just wanted to make sure we delineated that. And that's why I have the two of you here, because we've got the lead that has effectively created our intervention program to be the great thing that it is now. And then one of our team leads for our special education program that is also, you're phenomenal at teaching reading. That's your thing.
It's so much fun.
It's so much fun.
I didn't know I loved it so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So having that kind of covered in that base, let's start with the first question that I kind of shot at you guys in an email. So it was, broadly speaking, how do kids learn how to read?
Well, there's 2 theories kind of opposing major theories for kids learning how to read. Traditionally, kids for years and years and years learn how to read phonetically, which is literally just sounding out words until they remembered that k-at is cat, and then they kind of get that in their memory. So for years and years, they did phonics. And then around in the 80s, California kind of took a swing, a different direction. They went to something called whole language. And whole language was based on the idea that if you immerse kids in language, in good literature, that they'll kind of just figure out how to read.
Right.
That worked for some children, but for other children it didn't work.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons they think that California has low test scores of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, was because they were exclusively home language and they weren't teaching kids how to do cat.
Right.
So it's kind of swung back the other way. Most schools nowadays use what they call a balanced language approach.
Okay.
Balanced language is taking phonics and using phonics and teaching phonics, but also using good literature with phonics, and making sure kids are immersed in vocabulary, immersed in beautiful pictures in the literature, immersed in good ideas in the literature. So a more balanced approach is a much better approach than either significantly one or the other, because they're being exposed to language, and language is the basis of reading.
Right. Right. And so English is crazy. Like I talk to a lot of people that speak different language, and all of them say English is the hardest language that they've ever learned, because there are these words that you can't phonetically sound out, right? Like, I mean, I think there's full-blown skits where, you just flop around like a certain letter, and all of a sudden A is making 7 different sounds, and PH is making 4 different sounds, and I mean, all this, and then M in goes but like so anyway, the English language is kind of crazy.
Yes, it is.
So, however, a majority of it is phonics based. Can you dig into, so like our parents are going to hear things like sight words, but then they're also going to kind of hear things from teachers about practicing phonics skills and spelling tests. Can you break in a little bit more detail what teaching phonics looks like versus what teaching whole word or whole language looks like?
Yeah. So first, kids learn the letters of the alphabet, but then we teach them really not just the names of the letters. We emphasize the sounds of the letters that they make. And we start with short vowels like a, e, I,
Yeah.
and then we just make sure that they have all of their sounds and that they're pronouncing them and hearing them correctly.
Right.
Because there's some tricky ones.
Yes.
And I like to trick my kids, and I'll be like, what sound am I making? Because they'll replace and things like that. And then we want to make sure they can hear the different sounds in the words that they know. And then we start by putting 2 sounds together and then 3 sounds together and blending them.
Right.
So that's the first piece of the phonics instruction. And then we have a program that we do short vowels, and then we introduce 2-letter blends.
Okay.
And that's a really long one because we have blends at the beginning and the end.
Right.
And then we'd go into long vowels, and then there's vowel teams, and on and on and on. So that's kind of our phonics instruction that we go through.
Okay. And
So
then why do we bring in sight words? Like, why do those exist? Because it could sound like, wait, we're talking about phonics instruction, but then my kid's coming home every day with a stack of sight words.
Right.
So why do those exist?
Well, sight words are words you just have to know. You just memorize them by sight because they don't follow. Like the word is, I-S.
Right.
Sounds like z is or the.
Correct.
But if we only know decodable words, which are words you can break down into patterns.
Yep.
And then you read a simple sentence like the dog is black.
Right.
You have a couple words in there that are sight words. And so in order to read a sentence, you need to know both.
Right.
Decodable
you need to know
words
the
and
is
sight words.
because is should be is like an S.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the should be
To
or maybe the
Yes.
like E. Why is E saying an sound? I mean that makes no
correct.
sense, right?
Right.
But then the dog d a g
Yeah.
each letter is playing its right role, and then black
Yes.
each letter is playing its correct role.
Right.
Correct.
So you need to understand how to phonetically sound out, but then also combine your sight words, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that'll build over time. We also call sight words high frequency words because that is exactly what they are, the most common words. And there's so many different lists out there.
Right.
I think it can get really confusing for parents if you're overthinking it. They're like, do I do the Dolch list or the Fry list or what list are you doing? It's like, let's just break down into chunks, go by what your teacher's providing to you.
Right.
For sure. For sure.
Awesome. So since both of you are work with students that struggle, right? That struggle to learn using that method. So that method is going to teach most of the kids reading at a certain rate. There's a variance. Some are some struggle more than others. I was a struggling reader. I had to get some reading support when I was like 6th grade.
Yeah.
And so, which is fine. I've gone on to get 2 master's degrees. So it doesn't change. Like struggling at reading doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be a failure at life.
We're all language learners.
Correct.
We're all learning how to read.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you're working with students that struggle, right? What tools do you use to first identify where the holes are, and where are you typically seeing the holes, and then how do we fix it? So like, what tools do you use to identify the holes, like where they are, and then how do we fix it? So Caralyn.
So we use a very specific curriculum with the intervention kids, with intervention teachers, and I train them highly so that they are good at what they do. It's called Road to Reading. Okay. And Road to Reading is a phonics-based program with sight words. So it covers both of those areas. And so we start at the very beginning and making sure, do kids know, can they identify the letter D, a capital D and a lowercase d, and do they know it makes the sound duh? So we start with the sound symbol relationship. The letter makes the sound. Do they know that? Can they always do that when they see duh all the time? Right. Then we move to putting it together. So we basically, if you take a word like dog, duh, og, you have 3 letters on your page and you look at them and then you have to sound it out each letter, so you're breaking it apart, but then you have to put it back together to make it a word. So d, og, dog, and you see that I do it on my arm here, dog, dog, because we using a variety of methods and how kids learn. If you're using something physical and something active, if you're touching your arm on each sound, you're more likely to remember it.
Absolutely.
So we have all of these really good methods in Road to Reading that are built in that we train everybody on that help kids learn the best. So we take a half hour and we practice dog and all the other short vowel words like cat and black and things like that. We practice those over and over again so that they can get that fluency. Because if you're reading a sentence like the dog is black, so we recognize the as a sight word, and then dog, dog, the dog is, we got that sight word. Black, now we have to sound out black, black. You see how long that can take a child. It is very time intensive. And that's one of the reasons that reading is hard. Right. It's because it takes time for kids to put it all together in their brains. Right. And when the kids come to intervention in small group, we can just focus on that. Right. And really get it into their brains and practice. And we use leveled readers, which would look like at a lower level, it would have one sentence on the page supported by a picture. Okay. I mean, that's simple. Turn the page and you've got some of the same words, simple picture. And as you go up, you have more sentences on the page, you have more words, and it just builds on everything. But I was thinking about it just today. I was like, kids start school in kindergarten and they go all the way to 12th grade. That's 13 years in school. I'm like, why does it take so long? It just takes a really long time to learn how to read. Right. It takes years to learn how to read. Even your 9th graders up in school, they're reading new text in science. They have to figure out all these new words and they have to remember the meaning. They're literally practicing how to read all the way up through 12th grade. And when you get into college, you're reading still. So you always have this skill. It's such an important skill. If we can get the kids really strong base in that important skill, then they can have that skill for life. Right. But you have to keep practicing it. It takes a long time.
So what you're saying is reading is the key that unlocks access to learning for the rest of your life, right?
Everything. Because you got to read science. You want to learn about motions. You're going to read it. Yeah, we can watch videos nowadays, but you need to read it. You need to learn all that language. You need to learn all those different vocabulary words. History. all of those things, everything is connected to reading, even math. You think, well, math is just numbers.
It's another language. It's its own language.
Yeah, but you have to read the word problems.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, the reality is,
And symbols.
there's a lot of complaining about Common Core. Fine, whatever. We're past it.
Yeah.
This is the reality of where we're at.
Yeah.
Truth is, Literacy First has been doing applied math for a long time. So we've had a lot of word problems even before Common Core. The reality is now you need to read to access the math because it will be a word problem that says there are 7 goats and 8 eggs and the farmer John, whatever. Like,
a lot of analysis going on.
Correct. So there's multiple skills that go on just to access the math problems. And so we need to learn how to read to access the math. We need to learn how to read to access the science, learn how to read to access these, the English language arts, like the book reports, to understand stories and be creative. What about the developmental need to learn how to read? So like you made a really interesting comment, right? Like, so we can watch videos, we can listen to audiobooks. Okay, so if that is the case and we're moving more toward this AI world, and whether we like it or not, like AI is coming, and books can get read to us very easily. We can access knowledge really fast. So what is the developmental need for learning how to read? Like, do you guys have any thoughts on that? I do.
Well, what are you thinking, Troy?
What I'm thinking, so as a school psychologist, what I'm thinking is for your brain to develop correctly, learning to read affects all these other areas of your brain.
Yes.
Right? Just like many other activities. Like there's so many studies that show learning how to play the piano or learning an instrument increases cognitive performance on other things.
Yeah.
Just like learning how to ride a bicycle or doing balance activities or doing all these other things can have secondary effects on increasing cognition. Developmentally, reading, I believe, is an even a bigger deal than those. Reading is something that your brain needs as you develop over time, so that your brain can then have the peripheral or the secondary benefit of increasing all cognitive performance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like all the parts of your brain need to be moving and exercising. Like
totally. And
we don't
reading is
get
reading is kind of at the core of this.
So
and there's so much.
crucial.
There is research on it. I can't quote any right now, but I know I've read it. So.
Yeah, it's true. Just piggybacking on what Caralyn was explaining about our approach, like one of the reasons we use the program that we use is because it's very accessible. It's not this huge labor intensive program that you have to go to trainings for days on end, and then you have all these kits and you can't find your stuff. It's very overt and consistent. There's a pattern that we follow. And even parents, like you can buy it on Amazon. Like even parents can teach it.
I have in that room right there. I have 5 stacks of the Road to Reading book. They're $80 or something like that on Amazon.
It's relatively affordable when you're investing in a program.
Education, correct. Compared to other curriculums, it's incredibly cheap.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. But I like to think, so if you even just Google or Chat GPT, like what are some reading methods? What are research-based reading methods? Some of the words that'll pop up is the science of reading and Orton Gillingham. So Orton Gillingham is a method. It's basically making sure that we're engaging multiple parts of the brain, the senses. So making sure our kids see it, hear it, say it, and do it. So in any given lesson, we are segmenting and then blending. So we'll do a lot of like tapping. We can use magnets, whiteboards, tiles with letters on them. We stand, we play games. Kids learn through games. And so we take our sight words and we have games with those. We have our decodable words, like our high frequency, our PRWs, phonetically regular words. Play games with those. So we're just constantly exercising the brain. We're not just drill and kill. We're not just reading off of a page. And we teach in a logical order that builds on those skills. So your brain is building the stamina, building the skills, and you're just building on that. And then we're moving from our short-term memory to our long-term memory with that. And I just think developmentally, not even just thinking developmental by age, but by skill. This is the approach that we use.
Right. I mean, one thing that you reminded me of is, so on the idea that learning to read is core to cognitive development, is that there is a whole cognitive theory of cognition, which means the way your brain operates, phonological processing. So your brain we have tests that are all based around, for psychological evaluations, that are all based around phonological processing. And they're looking at 3 categories. Phonological awareness, which is your awareness that there are parts of words and that how they go together. So we were talking about act. So C is a part, A is a part, T is a part. Just like a cat has an ear and an eye and a tail, and all those parts go together to make a cat. These letters go together to make a whole word. And so that's phonological awareness. And then there's rapid naming, which is the speed at which you can access that information, right? So that's kind of fluency. We hear fluency a lot. And then the other one is for naming, and then the other one is phonological memory. And so it's and the crazy thing about phonological memory is that when I've done cognitive assessments, when I've done tested IQ, in the IQ test that looks at all areas of cognition, all areas of the way the brain works, there is a memory component to that test. And then in the phonological memory, there's a memory component to that test. I've seen tests where the memory component in regular cognition on normal things is strong, average to above average. Same kid I've seen have below average phonological memory. So there is a separate part. What that says to me is that there's a separate part of your brain that functions wholly for language. Doesn't matter what language it is, but it's wholly for language. And it is totally different. The memory component is different than the normal memory component. Therefore, that totally verifies to me that we need to be teaching kids how to read. And teaching kids how to read is so important because there's a whole part of your brain that's dedicated to language and phonics. We need to hone those skills. So sorry to jump in there and like kind of add that caveat, but you jumped into the next question perfectly. So can we keep going? What are some things parents can be doing to help their students who, let's say, are reading, like say they're reading like average? They should know that if they're going to parent conferences, their kids are reading within average ranges. How can we help kids who are struggling to read as well? So like, let's start with in kindergarten. What should parents be doing with kindergarten students?
We both agree on this one.
Yes. Okay, in kindergarten. Okay, kids need to have access to language. They need to hear language. Even if your home language is not English, they need to hear you speaking Arabic. They need to hear you speaking Spanish and Chaldean, all of those things. They need to hear you talking to them. I walk through the grocery store and I see kids, 2-year-olds who have their mom phone or an iPad in front of them. And I just want to say something, but I don't because that wouldn't be rude. But I want to say something because you should be talking to your kids. Talk to them about the grocery store. We would talk about, I never give my kids were so mad when they were little. I would never give them an iPad or anything like that because we would talk in the grocery store. They'd sit in the cart and I would be like, okay, we need to get corn today. What corn should we get? And you pull the corn off the shelf and you're like, okay. And you're like, okay, here's why I buy this corn. This corn, I like this corn. It tastes better than this other corn. And you talk about things and you talk about the math of things. You're like, oh, wow, look how expensive this is. Oh, we can't get this week. We'll have to wait. And you talk about those things. You have to immerse your kids in language. So then when they get to school, they have heard words. They understand what they mean, even if they can't read them. Even if it's in your own home language.
Absolutely.
They will start making those connections to English when they hear all of the English. They have to have access to that. So we call it a language-rich environment. Create a place in your home. Should be a place where you're talking to your kids at the dinner table and you're talking about where you're cutting up the vegetables. A language-rich environment is the entire basis of success in school and really success in life. We use that in kindergarten and in preschool. They use all of that to jump off into the things that, maybe your kid hasn't seen, doesn't know that D makes the duh sound and all of those things. But creating that language-rich environment before they even get to school is super important. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and some parents will say, oh, well, we will stop speaking our home language. And we're like, no, don't stop. don't, because the richer your home language, your primary language is, the deeper their secondary and third language has the potential to be. It's called CUPS, Common Underlying Proficiency. And so the deeper and the richer their first language is, even if they don't know how to read Arabic or read Spanish or read English, they're still listening and speaking. And because language is, we learn how to listen as babies, and then we start babbling sounds that we hear. It's so fun to watch videos of babies around the world because they sound different. They don't all sound the same. It's cute because they're mimicking the sounds they hear.
Yes.
And then we've learned how to listen, we've learned how to speak, and then we can learn how to read. Yes. And then later we're going to learn how to write. Oh gosh, read to your kids. I could start crying. Just read to your babies at night. My kids, I have littles and I have bigs. We still read at night, and that's like sacred to my family. And I think it's so important to me. We have more books than toys in my home because they're like so precious to me, because my parents read to me before bed. That was like our routine.
Yes.
And it's okay that you're just reading aloud and then talking about the pictures. My 3 and 4-year-old, we do 3 books a night, and while I'm reading, they'll have the other 2. They're still listening to me, but they're reading the pictures and they're just studying them. And I do not interrupt that process. I think it's just awesome.
Yes.
Like, this is great. And then also just narrating the day, like you're saying, you're out and about, narrate the day to your kids. Like when your kids are babies, just talk them through the day. Like,
it helps them develop context and then meaning for different words. Like you said, this or that, or this is better than that. I mean, that's a complicated, complex concept to explain. But if a kid, your kid, has been exposed to you having conversations with them, or just at the store or whatever, then these concepts all of a sudden make sense.
They have language.
And I love that you guys are focusing in on making sure, or on valuing the home language, because if whatever your home language is, whatever the language is that's spoken at your home, that's the natural first language, do not lose that.
Don't lose
for
it.
many reasons.
Yes.
One reason is a student with multiple languages, they tend to have higher cognition in other areas.
Yes.
So making sure your kid understands their home language, that's super important for them down the road. Second is the first language that a kid is exposed to, that's their first language. Like if they're exposed to the language when they're little bitty, that's their first language. Their brain will go searching for meaning in that language.
Yes.
So even if they're learning English, they will learn English at school. And if they learn a meaning of a word at school, if they know what that word means in their home language, their brain is speaking in the home language.
Yep.
You're always translating to the home language.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you go to Literacy First or any school, and if you have a home language that is different than the English, let's say for us, we have many families that speak Arabic, some that speak Spanish, and a few other languages. Speak those languages at home, because you need to build up their understanding of their home language so that they can also learn English faster.
Correct.
If you have taught them up to 5 years old, let's say Arabic, and then you decide, oh my gosh, they're going to school and they speak English at school, we need to flip the language at home.
Yeah, no.
Don't do that. Because first of all, they're in the United States. They are going to learn English. Like that's happening just because they're out and about. Don't do that. Keep speaking your home language, because as they're upping their knowledge of their home language, their ability to translate English into meaning will increase.
Yeah.
So if your home language is Arabic, keep speaking that at home. That's super valuable even to them learning English. They will learn English faster if they correctly understand Arabic, Spanish, whatever their home language is. So is that what you're saying?
Agreed.
Yes.
Okay,
Keep
cool.
it rich.
Yes.
Awesome.
And
Anything
then
else?
Next is read books.
Read books.
Read books. Read books when they're little. Read books when they're older. I mean, even simple books that, you can give them and they, bend up and they rip up. And you are looking at rich language. You're looking at beautiful colors. You are talking about what's happening in the book. You're learning different things. I have books about so many things in my house. My son liked trains, so I bought a lot of train books. And then my son liked construction equipment. I have a lot of construction equipment books. And then he got into Titanic, and then we had Titanic books. And, you know, it just kind of went through. And then my daughter was not like that at all. She wasn't interested in all of those things. She just wanted beautiful, rich books that made a connection with her. So we just had a wide variety of books in our house and in our rooms. I mean, I have books everywhere.
I do not doubt that.
And it's so important to just read to them. And it's not just important for the reading purposes where you're opening a book and you're looking at it and they see that you start on the left in English and you go to the right and they see that pattern, but they start to pick up things too. And as you're tracking and you're pointing to each word as you go, they will start to remember things, and they will memorize the books.
Oh yeah, you know, my daughter did that all the time. If I tried to rush through a book that she'd like memorize, she'd be like, "Dad, you misread it." I'm like, "You don't know how to read. What are you talking about?"
She knew the story.
Right, they memorize the stories, and that's a part of reading too. That's okay to memorize. That is
an early step in reading.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And actually, you want that. My son would want the same book every night, the same one. We read about trains. I read it over and over again. I got bored of it, I'll be honest with you. But it's not about me. It's about what he needs. And he needed to hear that book. And on top of that, we're sitting together. We're reading together. He feels good about reading. And it's a bond of love. So when they get to school, they have some type of deep thing inside them. They're like, oh, books access information, but they access love too. Yeah. And they remember that. And now I have a kid in college who's studying history and loves books and reads. And I got a daughter in our high school and she's a senior. Now, she doesn't always read a book. Hers is audio. So she's like very audio. So she listens to books, many different variety of books. And I'm like, okay, because she does know how to read. Yeah. So she's accessing it in a different way, but she still has that deep love of reading and learning. Right. Learning in so many different ways.
Awesome. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the super young readers. We focus a lot on super young kindergarten. Yes. What about as readers grow? So my daughter's now in third grade, and one of the saddest parts of third grade is that now the books that we read, she's now reading. And so, like, when it's time to go to bed, and I'm, like, opening up the book, and she's got these novels, the Wing Feather Saga, which is, like, so cool. Yep. And I'm way into the story. Every time we pick up to read, it's, like, a chapter beyond. I'm like, hey, have you reading this today? She's like, yeah, I read a chapter. I'm like, well, what happened?
Without
now I'm lost.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So now she has to, like, catch me up before we do our reading, which is fantastic. Or I've even had her read these books. I mean, these books are beyond her reading level.
Oh, yeah.
But she's pushing through because she loves that kind of reading. So anyway, as kids are developing, first grade, second grade, third grade, and beyond, what should we be paying attention to, and how should we be encouraging and helping them read? Sarah.
Oh, man. I mean, I just want to sing the praises of Mrs. Purvis, one of our 8th grade teachers, because, oh man, she was unexpectedly our favorite teacher last year.
That's awesome.
My son, who has loved the idea of sitting down to read together as a little, but then reading had its challenges, and he would prefer to listen, and he's smart as a whip, and he could tell you every little thing you said, but his eyes and his brain did not want to work together to read the words on the page. And so we went through this like drought of 3rd to 8th grade of like, I don't think this child's ever going to read a book on his own by choice. And I don't know what Miss Purvis did, but he devoured the entire Percy Jackson series. Really? At Christmas, he's like, I want the Percy Jackson series. So I was like, my gosh. Well, before I make this investment, I'll buy the first one. And after you read the first one, then we'll talk. And he came back like 3 days later. I'm done. I said, no, you're not. I was like, yeah, I'm done. And sure enough, like there was evidence that he had read and then he was talking to me about it. And then he went through the whole thing. Amazon could not keep up with me. And then he was done with the series and he wanted by the same author, a different series.
That's great.
Similar. So then I realized, okay, I can get these on Kindle with our library card, with the Libby app.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're doing that now. But it took so many teachers, many years of exposing us to different genres.
Right.
I remember Miss Barber in 3rd grade, she would just, it's time to read, and everyone would have their book. And I think some of them were faking it because they wanted to look really cool, and they'd have these large books. You know, Micah really wanted to do Harry Potter.
Oh, wow. At 3rd grade?
At 3rd grade, I was like, that's
Wow.
a little ambitious for your age, but I'm supportive of it.
Right.
But really just exposing your kid to all the genres that you're comfortable with. Like, these are the series I'm okay with being in our home.
Yep.
And just getting them locked in on that.
Yep.
And when we would take long road trips, I would get some books on CD. So we did get Harry Potter on CD, and then we also got Farmer Boy, which is part of the Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yes, love that.
My son was like, stop. And then, okay, what? And he's like, I have a question. And then he would analyze the
Really?
story. He's like,
Wow.
okay, if Almanzo's dad gave him this much money to buy an ox, I think money was a lot more valuable back then. Like, he was making all these
awesome.
connections
That's awesome.
with it. So it's like fostering that love of reading with wherever you're at, with whatever genre's working for you at that time.
Finding what your kid is interested in is key to keeping them interested.
Yeah.
Like I said, my son liked Titanic books, and so I was like, okay, I'm at the library, and I'm like, okay,
How many could there be?
Right.
Yeah.
There were more
So
than you would
many.
think. There were more than you would think. And the Titanic book, I would, he was in like probably 4th grade maybe then. And I'll be like, okay, the Titanic book is, 3 inches thick. And I was like, but it had pictures. And I would be like, oh yes, I want it. Okay, I would say. And even if he couldn't read all of the text, he could look at the pictures and he could read the captions below the pictures and put the story together. So even if the book is above their reading level, they could still make meaning on a lot of different things.
Right.
But finding what your kid is interested in and buying those books. Mine, when I was a child, so I struggled in reading too.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons I think I'm a good reading teacher is because I felt the struggle. I have been there. I've been in the struggle. I sat in the struggle. And so when kids struggle in the room in front of me, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Because I know I will give them tools and I support them in appropriate ways to make the struggle a little less. But sometimes they have to struggle to get through it. And that is an okay place.
Yeah.
Parents sometimes are not okay when kids struggle. When they're really tripping over words, they get so worried and they're like, oh, we can't do it. Don't read at all. No. Keep trying. It's okay. When your kid gets upset, say, it's okay. We're going to keep going. I'm right here with you. I'm here to help you however I can. And that's a good thing.
Right.
But I was interested in horse books. So I thought horses were amazing things. I was a city girl, so I didn't know a lot about horses, but I thought horses were amazing. So we read Black Stallion books, and my mom read to me, even when I was, dare I say it, in junior high. Yes, she did, because she knew I loved the horse books. I probably had 40 of them. My poor mom bought all the, we were always at the library. But that's okay. And that was good. And that's one of the reasons I feel like I'm successful nowadays is because my mom supported me even through all of those really hard times where I just really, I wanted to read so bad. But my brain was like, ooh, I can't figure this out right now. And it just took probably 10 times longer than any other kid. Any other kid that I could see around me to learn how to read. And but I did learn how to read, and it is okay. And I have my master's degree also. So even if you struggle in reading, that doesn't mean that your whole life is going to be a struggle. That just, it's part of the process. And maybe I struggled in reading so that I could become a reading teacher, so that I could emphasize and be there with the kids when they struggled in reading.
Yeah.
And then read, if they want to read books about soccer, okay, great, awesome. Maybe you have books about your faith that you want to read. I have a book right here. It's called My Easter Basket and the True Story of Easter. We would read this every single Easter, and it would talk about how the different colors of the baskets were related to my religion, which would be Christian, and how it was related to Easter, the meaning of Easter for Christians. And all of that, just those special things that my kids, and of course, little kids love all the beautiful colors and everything, but that made a connection to my religion. There's just so many things out there that can connect to different things. And I even brought a horse book.
Fine.
Yes, I know. I found this last night, and I brought a horse book.
That's great.
It's called Sergeant Reckless.
Oh.
It is a really interesting book about a
read that
horse. Yeah, I will let you borrow it. A horse in the Korean War.
Whoa.
And it talks about how this horse, they found this horse in South Korea, and how the horse, they had to train the horse to not be affected by all the loud sounds. And this horse would haul up ammunition up this really steep hill so that the ammunition would be for the guns, so they could shoot the guns at the opposing enemies. And it just talks about how amazing this horse is. But even today, at not being 16 years old anymore and loving horses, I still want to read about things that interest me. Find what interests your kids. Go to the library, buy the books on Amazon, find what interests them.
It's funny. I heard this from some guy that I, kind of follow and pay attention to his stuff, but it's more on like family planning and legacy and finance and stuff like that. But what he said is that I've started doing with my daughter is he's like, I pay my kids to read. He's like, reading is, and even from a guy who is a entrepreneur, business owner, who is, building legacy and, studies the Rockefellers. He said, reading is the core to knowledge. Yep. He's like, I pay my kids to read. He's like, I pay them 2 different rates though. He's like, if they read any book, I pay X. If they read a book that is a history book that's going to teach them about history, or is going to teach them about how to succeed, or is a biography, or is a some kind of story that's going to teach them about the future, or about financial freedom, or about whatever, I'm going to pay this. So my daughter's 9, and she's actually started taking off and reading just recently. It makes my wife very happy because she loves reading. And so I told her, I'll say, you pay 50 cents a book for a book that you read that is, it can be anything you want. She reads The Wing Feather, she reads all these fun kind of fantasy books. But I said, if you read a book that's a biography, or is a story about a real person, or is a story about history, a real event, or is about something that's teaching you about, finances and how to manage your money and things like that, I'll pay you $1. Wow. And so she's still reading her books, but the other day she picked up this book that was called Messed Up Markets, and it's for kids, and it's a it's a kid's book that we had around the house that I will go by and my wife go she goes, hey, look, Troy, look what she's reading. And I looked over, I'm like, cool. And so she was just into it, and so she came to me yesterday, and I had to pay her out $13. I was like, okay. I'm like, what? I might have to dial back because about how much she's reading, but I love that because she's learning to love to read, but then also learning that reading is a tool that will teach her how to succeed. Yeah. And sometimes it might sound kind of cheap or kind of, I don't know, people are like, oh, I don't pay my kids for everything. It's like, well, we get paid to go to work. Why don't we pay our kids similar? Because they're learning multiple things. They learn responsibility with money. Then you can talk to them about what to do with their money, whether they save it, whether they give it, whether they spend it, and how to invest. And then you can teach them how money works. But then also, they learn how to read and how to access knowledge. Yeah. And if they're learning that there's 2 different kinds of reading, there's reading for knowledge, for life skills, and there's reading for fun.
Enjoyment.
Learning those 2 skills is important. So that was an awesome tool that I learned. What tools have you learned that help your kids read?
Gosh.
So we covered finding things that they love. For me, it was magazines. I loved hockey, roller hockey. I loved dirt bikes. I loved BMX and soccer. My mom found on hot rods. In back in the 80s, I date myself, but back in the 80s, you'd be kind of careful with those magazines. Yeah. So my mom would rip out pages before she gave them to me. Yeah.
Screen them.
Specifically the hot rod magazine.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, those magazines, that's how I learned how to read. those are the things that I would sit and I would just read through it and be like, oh, I'm going to read about the small block 327 with the big valve heads and the 303, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it's like, that's what I learned from. Find what your kid likes.
Yeah. That reminds me that I used to get magazines for Micah too. And part of his like stocking at Christmas was like, here's the new fishing magazine. And he has reread them like 20 times.
That's awesome.
They don't get old to him. But yeah, I just think praising every effort. Yeah. Making it a positive thing as much as you can. And then just even asking other parents or asking teachers for help. Yeah. Because you learn by doing. When I went to college, I went to 4-year school, my credential was embedded into it. So that was the plan the whole time, was to become a teacher. And I thought I wanted to teach secondary, so 7th grade and above. So I didn't go to all the courses of like the fundamentals of reading. Here's how to teach children how to read. I was like, I don't know how to teach a kid how to read. You want me to teach a kid how to read? But then a parent at my first school I worked at, they were a military family. They were living in Japan, and she was homeschooling her kid, who was behind age-wise. She didn't learn how to read until she was in 3rd grade, but she got a specific program over there, and she donated it to us. Oh, she's like, this has changed everything for us, and if you need it, I want to give it to you. I was like, I need something. Yeah. And it was awesome, and it lined up with the Orton-Gillingham method, and just and I learned how to teach through that. And as I started seeing success with kids, I was like, oh, it's working. I can do this. And then came here and we have this program. So don't hesitate to ask teachers for help. Like, I need a little bit of direction. What's something simple I can do at home?
Yes. Yeah. And then I find that, so things you can do to help your kids learn how to read. Read with them.
Please read with your children.
If you do one thing and only one thing, read with your children. Yes. That will help them learn how to read. You read to them, then they'll eventually read to you. Awesome. Practicing all the spelling words that come home, practicing the sight words that come home. Reading over the sight words, making flashcards. When in the very beginning, when you start out to read. I might have a flashcard of the and a flashcard of is, and I'll be like, I'll show one, and I'll go the, and then they're like the, and I put it down, and I show is, and then they say is, and I put it down, and then I show the again, and they say the, and even as simple as just doing that, and you're working with 2 words, and then the next time you have 3 flashcards, and the next time you have 4. Because they need to memorize those things. They need to remember them. And then just talking about what that all means. Practicing your spelling words together. Counting and practicing and adding with the math. Those basic things, if you're reading at home, even in your own language, reading at home, you're telling kids reading is important. Yeah. And you're showing reading is important by doing it. And read with them and provide those good feelings. Read and practice. And your library is your best friend, your absolute best friend. Yeah. Half day Fridays, when we used to have the first and the third Friday were half day Fridays. Literally, I would pick up my kids from school. We would go by Wendy's and get some chicken nuggets, or if I didn't have a lot of money that week, I would pack lunch. We would go to the library. We would sit out at the picnic tables. We would eat our lunch. We would return our books, and then we'd get new books. Twice a month at least. And I had a special trick in my house because you know how kids lose things pretty easily. I had one place in the house that the books were allowed to live in the house. It was a shelf in the living room, and they all the library books were on that shelf. And so they would read the book, they would put them back on the shelf. Then they'd get a new one, and then they'd read it. So that we always knew where they were, so I could return them and not pay for them. Yep. So your local library is your best friend.
And the last thing I want to say related to the library is they do have shelves of multiple languages.
Cool.
So there are shelves of books in Arabic, like picture books. There's shelves in Spanish. Yes. I think I've seen Tagalog.
Nice.
So go to the Rancho and El Cajon libraries, please.
Yeah. Alpine as well.
Alpine
If
too.
you have a kid in Alpine and also one down in the elementary, go up to Alpine. The Alpine library is
It's beautiful.
so good. It's beautiful. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's really mellow.
Wow.
Yeah.
My daughter loves it. My wife takes her down there, and like she's been
Yeah.
going down there for 7 years, just hang out. So
Yeah.
That's great.
Awesome. Any last words of advice for parents?
No, just read to your kids.
Okay, so
Read to your
really the
kids.
non-negotiable that is so research proven. Just read your kids,
Yes.
starting when they're starting when they're born.
Yep.
I mean, just read at night because they will
Yep.
just get used to
Yeah.
reading, and it's a great way to wind down.
Yeah.
Oh, it
It's a
is.
great way to get them to chill out before bed. But read with your kids because the first step is them watching you read. The second step is them watching the pages and understanding the way the reading works. The
Yeah.
third step is them seeing pictures.
Yeah.
And they're going to see pictures and connect that with reading. Then they're going to sit there and they're going to sit next to you, and then they're going to pick up some of the words that you're reading. Then they're going to be able to read, and maybe they can read to you. And this stage, this reading with your kids goes all the way until 16, and if you're lucky, longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so if there's one piece of advice, read with your kids, and I
Yes.
think that is so undervalued that it's crazy.
Yeah.
The other thing is, flashcards are great. You're
Yeah.
doing stuff like that. Find
Sure.
find topics that your kids love to read. I found that having a whiteboard at home, they're super cheap. Just get a whiteboard.
Yeah.
If you're doing spelling words or practicing spelling,
Write 'em
use a
on a
whiteboard and
whiteboard.
erase
Yeah.
it and write it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Use one of those at home. We have one. Our daughter loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife will write messages to her. That was one of the ways that my wife kind of helped my daughter learn how to read, is that she would write her a message. So my daughter would go to bed, my wife would write her a message and leave it on the counter because she and I, my daughter and I wake up way earlier. And so, the note will just be there. And so Shiloh would have to sit there and pick up and figure out how to read these words. They're words that she should know how to read, but she was like, oh my gosh, my mom left me a message.
Yeah.
And she would find these messages in her note, in her lunchbox and things like that. That is such a incentive. Like you said,
Yeah.
reading is access to love. Like,
Yes.
like my mom loves me. I need to learn how to read this letter. Like that's so powerful, boys or girls. What else? Like really quick. How can we go over? Flashcards are great. Whiteboards, write messages to your kids, read with your kids.
Great. Practice those spelling words at home. The teacher
Yep.
sends home. Practice vocabulary words.
Yep.
Talk about the vocabulary words.
Yep.
Use the vocabulary words when you talk about things in life. And same with the spelling words. It's giving you access. All of this is rich language, and you
Yep.
want rich language in your life because that's what kids need to access all of these other things is
Cool.
rich language.
Oh, if you speak another language, do not abandon that language.
No.
Make sure that if you speak another language at home, Arabic, Spanish, Tagalog, whatever, make sure that language is retained. It's very special, important culturally to your family,
Yes.
but it's also incredibly important for your kid to be able to learn English correctly, for them to understand very, very acutely. They need to know educational academic language in their home language
Yes.
before they can truly transfer that to English.
Yes.
So use that language at home.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. We've
I
covered a
think
lot.
we've hit everything. Yeah.
Thank you
so,
both
too.
so much. This has been an incredibly valuable conversation.
Thank you.
I hope that we've added a lot of value for the parents and
so
maybe
too.
even teachers that are doing this. That's why we do this podcast, to add value to others.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for asking
Thanks.
us.
Yeah. And on that note, LFCS out.